Have you ever woken up thinking it would be just another ordinary Tuesday, only to have your entire life turned upside down by sunset? That's exactly what happened to me last spring, and I'm still trying to make sense of it all. If you've ever felt like you're just going through the motions, waiting for something, anything, to change, then this story might be exactly what you need to hear today. Stay with me until the end, because what I learned that day completely transformed how I see the world, and it might just do the same for you. If this resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of storytellers and truth seekers. The morning started like any other. My alarm blared at 6:30 a.m., and I hit snooze twice before dragging myself out of bed. The apartment was quiet except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing by outside. I had my routine down to a science: shower for exactly 7 minutes, coffee brewed while I dressed, breakfast eaten while scrolling mindlessly through my phone. I'd been living this same pattern for 3 years since moving to the city for a job that paid well but did little to fulfill me. My name is Alex Chen, and at 32, I had everything I thought I wanted: financial stability, a decent apartment in a trendy neighborhood, and enough social connections to keep loneliness at bay. But something was missing, a hollow feeling that had been growing steadily in my chest for months. I'd become an expert at ignoring it, pushing it down beneath layers of busy work and Netflix binges. That Tuesday in April seemed determined to follow the script of every day before it. The sky was overcast, threatening rain but never quite delivering. I grabbed my umbrella anyway and headed for the subway, joining the stream of commuters with their coffee cups and blank expressions. We were all ghosts, I thought, haunting our own lives without really living them. The train was crowded as usual, and I found myself pressed against the door, one hand gripping the overhead rail while the other clutched my phone. I was scrolling through emails when the train lurched to a stop between stations. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. A collective groan rose from the passengers, followed by the blue glow of phone screens illuminating frustrated faces. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the conductor's voice, crackling through the speakers, "we're experiencing a power issue. Please remain calm. We should be moving shortly." But we didn't move shortly. 5 minutes stretched into 15, then 30. People began to shift uncomfortably, checking watches, making calls to explain their lateness. I sent a quick text to my boss and leaned my head against the cool metal of the door, closing my eyes. That's when I heard it, a soft, melodic humming coming from somewhere to my right. I opened my eyes and turned toward the sound. In the dim light, I could make out an elderly woman seated nearby. She was small, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, and she was humming what sounded like an old folk song. Her eyes were closed, her expression peaceful, as if being trapped in a dark subway car was a perfectly pleasant way to spend a Tuesday morning. "That's beautiful," I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes opened, and she smiled at me. "My mother used to sing it to me when I was afraid," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. "It always helps to have a song when you're stuck somewhere." "I'm not afraid," I said quickly. "Just annoyed. I have a meeting at 9. She nodded, still smiling. "Of course. Very important, meetings. But sometimes, the universe has other plans for our day." I would have dismissed her comment as the ramblings of an eccentric old woman, but something in her eyes, a clarity, a knowing, made me pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean that sometimes, the best days of our lives begin with an interruption to our carefully laid plans." She extended her hand. "I'm Eleanor, by the way." "Alex," I replied, shaking her hand. Her grip was surprisingly firm. "Tell me, Alex, if you weren't going to your meeting today, what would you do instead?" The question caught me off guard. What would I do? I couldn't remember the last time I'd done anything spontaneous, anything that wasn't scheduled and predictable. "I don't know," I admitted. "Work is, it's what I do." "But is it who you are?" Before I could answer, the lights flickered back on, and the train gave a jerk before slowly beginning to move again. Relief washed over the car, people immediately returning to their phones and conversations. But I couldn't shake Eleanor's question from my mind. When we finally reached the next station, there was an announcement that the entire line would be shut down for emergency repairs. Passengers were advised to find alternative transportation. The crowd surged toward the exits, grumbling and frustrated. I lost sight of Eleanor in the chaos. Outside, rain had finally begun to fall, a gentle drizzle that promised to become heavier. I opened my umbrella and stood on the sidewalk, suddenly uncertain. My office was still 20 blocks away. I could take a bus, or call a rideshare, or... "Fancy meeting you here," came a voice beside me. Eleanor stood there, umbrella-less, raindrops glistening in her silver hair. "You're getting wet," I said, moving my umbrella to cover her as well. "A little rain never hurt anyone," she replied, but she stepped under the shelter anyway. "So, what's the plan now, Alex? Off to your important meeting?" I checked my phone. 3 messages from my boss, asking where I was. The meeting had already started without me. "I guess I'm already late," I said. "Perfect," Eleanor said, her eyes twinkling. "Then you have no excuse not to join me for breakfast. I know a wonderful little cafe just around the corner." I should have said no. I should have called a car and rushed to the office, apologizing profusely for my tardiness. Instead, I heard myself say, "Lead the way." The cafe was tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop on a street I'd passed 100 times but never really noticed. Inside, it was warm and fragrant with the smell of fresh bread and coffee. A bell jingled as we entered, and the man behind the counter looked up with a broad smile. "Eleanor. Twice in 1 week, I'm honored," he said, coming around to embrace her. "Marco, this is my new friend, Alex," Eleanor said. "Alex, this is Marco. He makes the best croissants in the city." Marco, a burly man with a salt and pepper beard, shook my hand enthusiastically. "Any friend of Eleanor's is a friend of mine. Sit, sit. I'll bring you my special." We settled at a small table by the window, watching the rain now coming down in sheets. I should have felt anxious about missing work, about the emails piling up, about the explanations I'd have to give. Instead, I felt a strange sense of liberation, as if I'd escaped from something I hadn't even realized was a prison. "So," Eleanor said, folding her hands on the table, "tell me about yourself, Alex. Not what you do, but who you are." It was such a simple question, yet I found myself struggling to answer. Who was I, beyond my job title and daily routine? I like photography, I said finally, remembering the expensive camera that had been gathering dust in my closet for years. Or I used to. I haven't had much time for it lately. "Ah, a photographer. What do you like to capture?" "People, mostly. Candid moments. There's something magical about catching someone in a genuine expression, something they're not posing for or aware of." Eleanor nodded, her eyes bright with interest. The truth of a person, revealed in an unguarded moment. "Exactly," I said, feeling a spark of enthusiasm I hadn't experienced in a long time. I used to dream of traveling the world, documenting different cultures, different lives. I even had a blog for a while. What happened to that dream? I shrugged, the familiar weight of practicality settling back on my shoulders. Life happened. Bills, responsibilities. My parents sacrificed a lot for me to go to college, to have opportunities they never had. I couldn't just throw that away to chase some idealistic fantasy. Marco arrived with 2 plates of pastries and 2 steaming cups of coffee. On the house, he insisted when I reached for my wallet. "Eleanor brought me a new customer. That's payment enough." As we ate, Eleanor shared stories from her own life, how she'd been a dancer in her youth, traveling with a company across Europe and Asia. How she'd fallen in love with a musician in Prague and followed him to America. How they'd built a life together, raised 2 daughters, and how, after he passed away 5 years ago, she'd decided to live each day as if it were a gift. Because it is, she said, dabbing at her lips with a napkin. Each morning we wake up is another chance to be alive, not just to exist. Her words resonated with something deep inside me, a truth I'd been avoiding for too long. I found myself telling her things I'd never told anyone, about my childhood in a small town, my parents' expectations, my own abandoned hopes. The rain continued to fall outside, creating a cocoon around our conversation, as if we were the only two people in the world. When we finally left the cafe, the rain had stopped, and the sun was trying to break through the clouds. I checked my phone to find it dead. I'd forgotten to charge it the night before, another break in my usually meticulous routine. Well, it seems the universe is determined to disconnect you today, Eleanor said with a laugh. What will you do now? I should have found a place to charge my phone, called my boss, salvaged what was left of the workday. Instead, I looked at Eleanor and said, what would you do, if you were me? Her smile widened. I'd remember that I love photography, and that this city is full of moments waiting to be captured. My camera is at home. Then that's where we should go next. The decision to bring Eleanor to my apartment should have felt strange. I barely knew this woman, but somehow, it didn't. She waited patiently while I charged my phone enough to send a brief message to work claiming illness, then watched with obvious delight as I unearthed my camera from the back of my closet. It's been almost 2 years since I used this, I admitted, brushing off a thin layer of dust. Then it's hungry for images, Eleanor said. And so are you, I think. We spent the rest of the day wandering the city, my camera in hand. Eleanor knew places I'd never seen despite living here for years, a hidden garden between office buildings, a street artist who created miniature sculptures from discarded metal, a rooftop accessible by a service elevator where you could see the entire skyline. At each stop, I took photos, feeling rusty at first but gradually rediscovering the eye I'd once had for composition and light. Eleanor was a perfect subject, her face expressive and unguarded. But she also pointed out other shots, a child jumping in a puddle, an elderly couple sharing an ice cream cone, a businessman feeding pigeons when he thought no one was looking. Through my lens, the city I'd been sleepwalking through for years suddenly came alive with stories and possibilities. As the afternoon waned, we found ourselves in a small park, sitting on a bench as the setting sun painted the clouds in shades of pink and gold. I scrolled through the day's photos on my camera's display, amazed at what I'd captured. These are really good, Alex, Eleanor said, peering at the screen. You have a gift. I'm out of practice, I said, but I couldn't keep the pride from my voice. Some of the shots were genuinely beautiful, capturing moments of connection and emotion I hadn't even realized I was seeing when I pressed the shutter. You know, Eleanor said thoughtfully, my late husband used to say that talent doesn't go away just because you ignore it. It waits, patiently, for you to remember it's there. I looked at her, this strange, wonderful woman who had appeared in my life like a character from a fairy tale. Why did you talk to me on the train? I asked. Out of all the people there, why me? Eleanor's eyes crinkled at the corners as she smiled. You looked like someone who needed to be reminded of something they'd forgotten. And what was that? That life isn't what happens between 9 and 5, Monday through Friday. Life is this, she gestured to the park, the sunset, the camera in my hands. The unexpected moments that break through the routine. The chances we take when plans fall apart. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the sky deepened from pink to purple. Finally, Eleanor stood, smoothing her skirt. I should be getting home. My daughter will be calling for our evening chat. Can I walk you? I offered. No need. I'm just a few blocks away. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook, tore out a page, and wrote something on it. But here's my number. I'd love to see those photos when you've had a chance to look through them properly. I took the paper, suddenly reluctant to see this day end. Thank you, Eleanor. For everything. She patted my cheek gently. Thank the universe for a broken subway. Sometimes our derailments are actually course corrections. I watched her walk away, a small figure growing smaller against the twilight, until she turned a corner and disappeared from view. Then I looked down at my camera, at the day captured in digital memory, and felt something shift inside me, a realignment, a remembering. That night, I stayed up late, transferring the photos to my laptop, making minor adjustments, rediscovering the joy of creating something beautiful. On impulse, I revived my old blog, dormant for years, and posted a selection of the day's images under the title, The Unexpected Day. Before going to bed, I sent the link to Eleanor's email, which she'd included with her phone number. The next morning, I woke before my alarm, feeling more rested than I had in months despite the late night. I made coffee and opened my laptop to find that my blog post had received more comments overnight than any of my previous work ever had. People were responding to the images, to the story I'd briefly shared about a day of derailment and discovery. Among the comments was one from Eleanor, "See? The world was waiting for you to remember." I went to work that day, apologized for my absence, and carried on with my usual tasks. But something had changed. I found myself noticing things I'd overlooked before, the way light fell across my desk in the afternoon, the genuine smile of the barista who made my lunch break coffee, the subtle signs of life happening all around me while I'd been too busy to see it. Over the following weeks, Eleanor and I met regularly. Sometimes we explored the city with my camera, other times, we simply talked over tea in her cozy apartment, filled with mementos from her dancing days and photographs of her family. She became a mentor, a friend, a bridge to a part of myself I'd almost lost. My blog gained followers. I started receiving messages from people who found resonance in my images, in the stories I told through them. A small gallery owner contacted me about displaying some of my work. Opportunities began to appear, as if they'd been waiting in the wings all along for me to be ready for them. 6 months after that unexpected Tuesday, I made the decision to reduce my office hours to part-time, creating space to pursue photography more seriously. It was scary, a step away from security toward uncertainty, but it also felt right in a way nothing had for years. "You're not abandoning responsibility," Eleanor assured me when I shared my doubts. "You're embracing it, the responsibility to live authentically, to use the gifts you've been given." A year to the day after our first meeting, I held my first solo photography exhibition. The centerpiece was a portrait of Eleanor, her eyes twinkling with that same knowing look she'd given me on the train. Beside it hung the very first photo I'd taken that day in the park, a shot of raindrops on spring leaves, sunlight breaking through clouds, the world washed clean and ready for new beginnings. Eleanor stood beside me at the opening, elegant in a blue dress that matched her eyes. "I knew you had it in you," she said, squeezing my hand. "All you needed was a little derailment." Looking around at the gallery filled with my work, at the faces of people moved by what I'd created, I felt a fullness in my chest where that hollow feeling used to be. "Thank you for talking to a stranger on a broken train," I said. "There are no strangers," Eleanor replied with a smile. "Only friends we haven't met yet, and lessons we haven't learned." That unexpected day didn't just change my career path or revive an old passion. It changed how I move through the world, with eyes open to possibility, with awareness that the best moments often come when plans fall apart, with the knowledge that who we are is so much more than what we do. Sometimes I think about who I would be if that train hadn't stopped, if Eleanor hadn't spoken to me, if I'd continued on my carefully plotted course without interruption. I might still be sleepwalking through my life, missing the beauty and connection all around me, waiting for something to change while doing nothing to change it myself. Instead, I learned that the unexpected detours, the broken plans, the moments that pull